All right, guys, welcome back to Daru Strong Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Daru. Today we have strength and conditioning coach Bobby Stroupe on the show. Bobby is the founder and president of Athlete Performance Enhancement Center, APEC in Texas. He also is the strength and conditioning coach for Patrick Mohomes, NFL Pro Bowler, quarterback for the Super Bowl, MVP, also future Hall of Famer maybe, but he's also been working with Bobby since he was in middle school all the way up into now. So we get to talk a little bit about Patrick and his successes, but also about Bobby and what he's doing with his performance center and also what he's doing now, gaining access and working with so many other athletes around the world, also with his 2 locations in Texas itself. So we get into deep detail on that. But before we do that, have to shout out the sponsors, Athletic CBD. Go to athleticcbd.com. Use my discount code Daru if you have some bumps, bruises. If you're beat up a little bit, you need some CBD, go check them out. I highly recommend it. Use my discount code Daru at your checkout. Also, Vivo Barefoot. If you want to know what shoes I'm wearing inside my training, when you watch the videos, either on Instagram or on YouTube, they are Vivos. So go to vivobarefoot.com. Use my discount code DaruStrong20. Get 20% off your final purchase when you go onto the website. Also, if you're a coach or a trainer or just an athlete wanting to learn some of my methods, principles of training, the systems that I use with all of my athletes, you can check out my mentorship program. It's a lifelong program that you will have access to forever for a one-time fee. So check it out now. Link is in the description. Now, let's get on to the podcast.
Welcome to the Daru Strong Podcast. Daru Strong Podcast.
Let's go. Mind over matter. Put your mind somewhere else and keep going. That little voice in your head is trying to stop you from getting to where you want to be. Be successful and keep moving forward.
With your host and world-renowned strength and conditioning coach, Phil Daru.
All right, and we're back. Bobby Stroupe in the building. What's going on, brother?
Just living, man. Doing great. Watching you do your thing.
My man. So, for the 0.5 people that don't know who you are, my audience, yeah, man, let them know, just give them a little basic background information on yourself and what you're doing now, because you're doing a lot of different things. But for me, I've been a guy that's been watching from afar, and I love your stuff, man. I love what you're doing with your athletes and the kids that you have and also your business. But can you go into a little bit more detail on how you got started in the industry and now where you're at currently?
Absolutely. So first off, that's an honor, and I appreciate the kind words. As far as where I started, I was just a kid that wasn't very good at sports, and I was the smallest kid and the last kid picked on the playground. So I always had this disposition of curiosity and wanting to figure out a way to selfishly help myself. And I think that kind of spiraled into an interest in some things that were right and wrong, of course, in the sports performance world, even as a young student athlete. Had an injury in high school that really brought light to the therapy side from my interest and standpoint there. And then after that, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So I played college athletics. I was offered track scholarships and football scholarships, ultimately played football. And throughout that time, I really, if kids were going to Cabo on spring break, I was interning somewhere. I was going to learn from this. For Christmas, I wanted a certification or a book or something. And I was a weird kid that didn't do me well socially at the time, but that's kind of how it started. And the short of it after that was a brief stint as an arena football player, and went to Hawaii to work for my mentor in a sports performance setting. Place shut down in a month, so I ended up being shut down in a month, and I had no jobs because I didn't look, because I already had one, right?
Yeah.
But it ended up being such a blessing because I had to come home and live with my parents, and I got put into the corporate fitness. I was managing one of those large high-end places, and it taught me a lot about what I did not want to do, and it taught me business. And I got out of there within a year. I was recruited by some physical therapists to East Texas, small town of 100,000. So much like Lauren Lando, who you had on, I worked in the physical therapy setting for a few years, and was able to be the bridge person between physical therapy and return to play, which we know is a huge gap. And then from there, just started with middle school athletes, high school athletes, had some great opportunities with some good people, and and things have kind of gone from there. Oh, and then I went back and did a fellowship in therapy after that. So I do have an educational track background in strength conditioning and therapy.
Nice. Can you elaborate a little bit more, if you can, on your injury and what ended up happening there and what got you into all of this from the bridging of the gaps?
Yeah, so I'd finally overcome the whole, I was a try-hard kid. So I'd gotten to the point where I was having success in athletics. And what was interesting, man, is I was doing all the wrong things that you and I know and that people in our profession protect people from.
Yeah.
So I was doing squats 4 times a week and trying to max out, doing sets of 5 until I couldn't anymore. I was doing, all these things. What ended up happening is I had an avulsion fracture in my hip. And, when you're iliac crest and you're still growing, that growth plate issues, things like that. I was a 10,500 meter guy. And so, being the size that I am, when that happened in the second game of my senior year, I needed to try to figure out a strategy to get a scholarship. Because at that point I was in a situation. So there's not a lot where I was at, physical therapy, I was going to the public library, literally, and doing things. And then my teammates would stay and do things with me. And, in track season, I broke some of my track records from the previous year and was able to be afforded some opportunities. And I was blessed to have that situation.
That's awesome, man. So then after that, you obviously opened up APEC, and what prompted you to do that? I mean, I know you're working with athletes, you did some internships, you've obviously had all your self-education going for you. What made you or thrusted you into just owning your own business and doing your thing like this now?
Yeah, so a client that I worked with in passing when I was with my mentor recommended to these physical therapists to recruit me down. So when they did, we didn't have a name. So I came down, I worked out of their PT clinic, and the idea was we'd run speed camps. Well, why? Because I was fast. So they thought that inherently I knew about speed, which we all know that's a major misnomer in this profession. But so we started with that, and the name of the company was Accelerate. And what's crazy is we didn't have a facility, and I was working off fields, getting run off public parks and things like that. But then when we did open a facility, I was getting car park calls and things like that. And Fast and Furious was hot at the time. I know I'm dating myself, but so I put, so check this out. I put Performance Enhancement Center under the word Accelerate so I could just quit dealing with people that wanted car parks. And
yeah.
Hey, these were Yellow Pages days, Phil.
Yeah. Damn.
Yeah, exactly. So when I put Performance Enhancement Center under the door, that's a long name. Accelerate Performance Enhancement Center is more confusing than Accelerate. So now I started getting 60-year-old man that was asking me for the doctor, and I'm like, I'm not. And then I would figure out, okay, well, performance enhancement's a problem. Nobody knows what I'm doing here. And randomly one day, somebody says to me, "Hey, I just am having a hard time taking my kid to ballet and then over here to APEC." And I said, "What did you say?" APEC. We call this APEC. And then it stuck. And when we ventured outside of just the speed space, we referred to our company now as Athlete Performance Enhancement Center. So that's the origin story for that.
Yeah, it's funny, man. I have a there's a place by my house that's called Ultimate Performance, right? And so I drove past it and I'm like, oh, that must be a gym. Then as I walked in there, it was all about car parts. So it's like, you kind of messed me up a little bit. So I was like, all right. So I understand what you're talking about. Oh man. But so with that, I want to talk about Patrick, but let's go a little bit further because you've been working with kids since, how young do you work with them at? Like 7, 8 years old? Something like that?
We'll start with kindergarten because that's our long-term athletic development model has 4 levels. And it's kindergarten all the way through 8th grade.
So how do you go about, because I have a 6-year-old myself, and I've always been intrigued. I've had a lot of guys on here that have worked with youth athletes at that younger age, right? And developed them over the years. And you've done a tremendous job with Mohomes, but probably with countless other athletes that we don't even know about. How do you go about like setting up a structured plan of attack when you're trying to get a kid of that youth age growing into his own? What's the main things that you're looking for?
Yeah, so I think it starts with priorities on windows of trainability and development for the certain age groups. And for us, when people ask me how young we start working with kids and I say kindergarten, they kind of look at me like, oh, I mean, that's a cash grab. But I think the only reason those things happen is because we were getting parents come to us with things that they were doing and we didn't agree with it. And one of the things that's the culture of our company is if you're going to talk negatively about something or you don't agree with something, you need to provide something to take that place that has value. And so that's where a lot of these programs came from. And so, for instance, with a kid that's, between, I would say, kindergarten and second grade, there's a lot of gymnastica type movements, development of the spine, coordinating the shoulder and hip girdle with the spinal engine, making sure that they've got cervical movement in all planes of motion, 360-degree angles, function of the ankles and wrists. Now, look, they don't care about dorsiflexion. They don't want to hear about any of this. But saying things, okay, can you crawl like this animal? Okay, who can do this? How many people can turn in this circle? How many of you can roll holding onto your feet without using your legs? You present these things and gamify it. And what we found is they have fun with their bodies. And what's more important than, the curriculum, obviously there's a priority list and it does make sense, right? They've got to start exploring what makes them unique and what they love about their body. That has got to be the number one thing with these kids is they've got to fall in love and they've got to be curious about who they are. And that's got to be the priority right there.
Yeah, for sure. And how you go about coaching and teaching the kids too as well. Like, again, proper cueing techniques and communication, understanding how to talk to a young kid like that. I think, you think that for me, I'm a father, so I understand how to talk to kids. But do you think that you have to be a father to be able to do that? Or is it something that it could be intuitively in you?
I've thought about that a lot, Phil. I think it's a great question. I don't think any of us ever appreciated the statement of, well, you don't understand this because you don't have kids when we were in that situation. And I think that statement's probably true at times, but I think the skill of coaching is independent of experience in a lot of ways. Experience can make you better at it, but you can still have it without it. And I think obviously as a parent, I think if you're committed to doing it, I think it makes you better at every aspect of your life. But from a coaching standpoint, I think you can. I have coaches that are better at it with certain age groups than others. And it doesn't have to do with their sex, their age, their experience with children, if they've been a nanny, if they have kids. It really is about their ability to accept the communication and really the culture of that group and what's needed. And if they can put themselves as that character for that moment in time, then I think you can really do it. And I've really seen that executed on a high level from some unsuspecting places.
Mm-hmm. So now, like, you have, again, a wide variety and also a wide age range who you're training. When you're talking about like pro athletes, right? What separates let's say the 5th year pro NFL guy to the 1st year collegiate athlete? And what are you actually doing with them as different than the college guy?
Fantastic question. So we've had the honor of watching kids, literally the same kids that we had from elementary all the way to the pro level in 6 different sports, over 40 athletes.
Wow.
So now we've had over 400 professional athletes in our system.
Nice.
But I'm talking about kids that we knew from at least 5th grade or down to kindergarten. Now I don't know. I have not decided what that tells us that we know, but I can tell you what it makes sure that we know isn't a fact. There's a lot of things you don't have to do that people tell kids they have to be able to do. Mm-hmm. And so what I like to do is dismiss those things first. So, all the things that people say you got to do, you got to travel in this team, you got to do this thing, you better play this sport this time, and you got to have them throw in this much. I know that those things aren't true because we've literally seen it.
Yeah.
But now as far as the difference, I would say at the professional level, it's really funny. You see this probably with fighting too, is the most talented aren't always at the top of the sport. Quite honestly, not even close. Yeah. Some of those guys are there, they're freaks, but the common denominator I found of every elite person that's made it to veteran level is that they communicate on a higher level. They take the details very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
The way they interact with people is different, and they typically don't need to be told the same thing twice. I mean, as far as common denominators, those are pretty much the only common threads that I've got, because none of them were just outlier freaks. No, I shouldn't say none of them. There is no common thread of all of them just being a freak show from elementary all the way up. In fact, most of my pro athletes that I've had their entire athletic career, they were in the middle of the pack for the majority of the time in their development.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to talk about Patrick and specifically, he didn't start at quarterback till the third game of his junior year. So it wasn't like this guy was just everybody was like, he's going to be an NFL Hall of Famer, or even that he's going to play varsity football. You know, and he's not the only one.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've seen some common threads as well. I'd be interested to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think all those things come into play. I'm looking at kids, I'm looking at work ethic, I'm looking at organization, I'm looking at their ability to be on time, be structured, have a system, like almost unknowingly having a system that they follow, because that's going to go ahead and transfer over into the next level. But yeah, it's the same thing. Like even with all my fighters, I mean, most of my fighters are the best ones, like the top of the top. When they came to me, they didn't know how to lift weights. They probably couldn't run, but they knew how to fight. And they knew that they had to do something every day and work at it every day in order to be the best that they can be. So I think that that's one of the major things that I'm looking at. But it's interesting because, I mean, you take kids from, I mean, they can barely even walk to all the way up into the professional level. And you've done it, countless times and times again. So give me it kind of cut off a little bit, but I want to make sure that we get this. What are the 3 or 4 major things that you're seeing from those individuals that I know it's hard, but that you can be like, okay, this individual has what it takes to make it to the next level? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think the first thing is ownership over controlling the results, and not allowing a coach or other people around them to dictate where they find areas of improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And so extreme ownership and that whole thing has been taken for a ride, but there's concepts of that I feel like the best do that.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at an athlete, I probably look at things a little bit differently and probably overanalyze, but what is their technical approach? What is their tactical approach? Those are two different things.
Yeah.
How do they approach their biomechanics? Do they have a healthy view of therapy and where that fits? Do they understand communication and the consequences of communication with everybody around them? Do they understand the spirit of the culture around them? I mean, there's so many things that make people great, and physical is one thing that can be broken into 1,000 categories of another 1,000 categories. And so, maneuverability, creativity, problem solving, there's such a list of things that make athletes elite performers. And we try to feed into those things.
Yeah. What's funny is I'm around a lot of high level individuals, not just in the sporting world, but now, with just in general, businessmen, entrepreneurs, things of that nature, and then also celebrities too now. And what I am seeing, a common theme there is that they work their ass off, right? They're always in some state of understanding of where they're at now and where they want to go. So they have a clear vision of where they want to go. They again we talked about this, extreme ownership on everything. They take that leadership role and they lead from the front. And then again, just understanding and having full confidence in their abilities. So those are the major things that I'm seeing too as well. So it kind of goes hand in hand, pretty congruent to what you're talking about too as well. So let's talk a little bit about Patrick. Now, obviously, we all know about his injury and everything there, but what are you doing right now to help him get back to where he needs to be? I know he's had the ankle injury and things like that. I mean, he still played phenomenal in my opinion at the Super Bowl. Like that throw was crazy. And the kid, what happened? The kid hit his face mask and he couldn't catch it or something like that?
Yeah, it was unfortunate. It did hit him in the face mask. But those guys are phenomenal players, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, there was about 15 guys on that team that probably played the worst game of their career on the same day. And it is what it is.
Yep.
We didn't get it done. and we got to be better. That's the bottom line.
100%. I love that. So what are you doing now with him? Are you just waiting till he gets surgery, or is what's the goal here?
Yeah, and to be fair and protect the relationships with the team and the NFL and Patrick, obviously, I'll give as much as I can.
Yeah, definitely.
So for him, what really happened was an off-camera thing. Okay, so he's got what was reported to the media is probably a little bit of a basic explanation.
Gotcha.
He's already had surgery.
Mm-hmm.
He had surgery Wednesday after the Super Bowl,
mm-hmm.
and we've already had a plan. I'm fortunate that the Chiefs and I have a good relationship. The head of their sports medicine staff, Rick Burkhalter, is one of the best and one of the OGs. He's really good, and Julie Freimeyer is a great AT, and we talk consistently. So there is a plan in place. Obviously, when you have a surgery of this magnitude, that is probably different than some of the traditional things that you might read out there.
Yeah.
He's got some things right now that we can take the time to work on. Obviously, also, after a season like that, you want some downtime. He typically takes three weeks off. If I can get him to 21 days, that's good.
Yeah.
But he usually doesn't get there. But he just had his first kid. So Sterling Sky was born last week. We knew that, so we planned the off season so that before this injury even happened, he was going to stay until his doctor allowed them to travel back to Texas. So I'm actually coordinating with him virtually right now, and then I'm going to Kansas City for a check-in with the team and him until he can come back, which he'll be back here soon enough. But we've got a plan. Our off seasons are laid out very specifically. When you say people, typically know what's next, I think NBA people probably do that the best. I'm going to add this element to my game this offseason. This is how people defended me. This is how I'm going to answer it.
Yeah.
And Patrick and myself have really been that way since he's been in college, and trying to figure out, okay, this is the next thing. We're not going to try to do everything, but this is one element we're going to add in. And we definitely have a plan for this offseason, and we're excited about it.
Nice, man. Yeah, I look forward to it, man. He's a phenomenal athlete. You obviously done a great job building him up. Phenomenal person from what I'm hearing. So let's talk a little bit about business now. So with the gym itself, you have 2 gyms. Am I right?
Yeah. So we started the business in Tyler, Texas, a town of 100,000 people, and it's in between Shreveport, Louisiana, and Dallas. So if you've ever driven on 20, you know that's it. It's 90 miles in either direction, and I love it. But we started it there, and then we got recruited to expand to DFW. We had a lot of agents that said, if you could have something anywhere around the airport, I think you'd have a high following of professional athletes that would drive to see you. And we've been fortunate that they were right. I mean, we've got a good situation in both locations. I've been operating 2 locations now for going on 6 years. And the APEC original in East Texas, we've been there for 16 years. So it's been a ride, man, and I learn a lot every single day.
Yeah, so how many coaches do you have now working for you? Because I know you can't be in both places all the time.
No, we've got a great team, man. They support, they really run the show. So we've got about 20 full-time employees throughout the year. As far as coaches are concerned, 12 of those are coaches. Actually, 13 of those are coaches. And then the other are part-time help, or they're in between the intern process and they're trying to earn that full-time position. So technically they're a coach, but they're not leading the groups, or they're not in charge yet. So we've got quite a process, and I'm really proud of our coaching development system and how our team is. And it's been really something to learn that, because, I don't know about you, but for the first 9 years of this business, I was the only full-time employee, and it was hard. It is hard when you're trying to grow something. You have to find a way to fill people's cup. You have to find a way to pour into them, and that can be a dangerous and scary thing. Yeah, and we're not, and that's not something that's taught to us. So it's been a process for sure.
Yeah, I think organizing and structuring out your system is important. Making sure that you have like a decentralized command in a sense, right? Making sure that you're not micromanaging everybody and giving them the opportunities to showcase what they can do. And then also putting people in places that you can't be in, or filling in, like you said, filling up the cup with individuals that may help your weak points, and that may be their strong suit. So I think that that's one thing when you're put in that leadership role and you're a businessman, entrepreneur, CEO of the company. That's a major thing as a leader, as a coach. But I think that as a coach and as a captain, things of that nature kind of put you in the right position because you're already used to being there. So you're doing a great job, man. I'm liking what you're doing as far as like watching everything kind of unfold for you. Now, with your training methodologies, what are you looking for when, let's say, Patrick comes in and he's getting ready for the season? As you said, you were looking at weak points that you wanted to get worked on and things of that nature. What is the process that you use to plan out this thing?
Yeah, so for any athlete, what I'm looking at first is tissue quality, joint calibration, and just basic movement. There's two ways to look at that: is how does their body prefer to move versus what do you want? And I think a lot of times people get caught up in, well, every athlete should move like this. Like this is your model, your mechanical model, and then here's signature uniqueness over here. Mm-hmm. So somewhere in the middle is where you're at. Now, how far down this line do you need to be? And then how far down this line do you need to be? Because I think it's tough when people start pointing out errors in movement with athletes they don't know, because they don't know where they're going or where they came from or what their natural disposition is. And some people are born with some tough setups, and you've got to neurologically, if you don't reprogram that every 3 days, maybe they're at some risk factors, right? So for Patrick in particular, his feet and ankles are always a priority, and they always have been. This guy had Jones fractures in high school. He's had ankle issues since middle school, severe. If you look at his body and you just look at it, it's not a normal setup for an athlete on that level. Mm-hmm. And he's not the only one. I work with, probably 33% of our pro athletes have some disadvantages in their anatomical setup. Yeah. And you can tell me you can fix all those. Anybody can tell me they can fix all those, but some things aren't going to be fixed. I would love for a coach to show me where they got an extreme case of scoliosis and got that person to a perfect RDL or a power clean. Like, you're going to have to do other things. And so sometimes, and this is just using those people or different people as an example, but with Patrick, it's no different. You've got to calibrate the tissues and the joints together. Tissue restoration is one. After that, we're going to move into concepts of stability and a lot of isometrics to flush out a lot of the things, the damage from the season. So remodeling, and then obviously strength thresholds. I work for strength thresholds in order for the body to be able to handle the power that I want, the volume of power that I want to train at. Once I have those, I touch on those. I don't keep training those out. But my priority is to get the power and speed of movement as fast as possible in the off season. Now, if I can't get past priority number one, I've got to stay there the whole off season. I'll do it. I've done it before with different athletes. I've done it with him. Yeah. But what I would prefer is to make those progressions happen when they happen, instead of having like a traditional 3 week on, 1 week off. We go to phase two. I don't do GPP, stability phase, strength phase, power phase, speed phase. I just don't.
Yeah. I've gotten away from that a little bit now, just as experience, has been going on. Like in the first couple of years, obviously you follow that model, something like a block or a linear style. But after about like the 5th year of doing this, man, and actually doing it on myself, like more of a like a vertical integration type of concurrent style of training is what I'm looking at, and also auto-regulation all the time, especially with the guys that I have. But I like the fact that you take your time with the athlete, depending on what they're actually getting better at. How long do you usually see, that adaptation occur? Is it 3 weeks, 4 weeks? I know it just depends, but on average, what are you looking at?
Well, first off, on the block periodization, I think there is a place for it. And I do obviously think that it's deep rooted in science. And there's a lot of results over the last 100 years and how that works. So it's just it doesn't always work for me. Like you said, you find other options. To answer your question on that first phase and how long that takes, I would say on average, it's 3 weeks. If I were to take a mean for all our pro athletes across all the different sports, most of them are ready. They're ready. It's like pulling nails. They're ready to move on in 3 weeks. And I feel like their body is good enough to move on in 3 weeks with that first initial phase.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people, I mean, I would say the longest that I've seen without a surgery type situation is probably around 8 weeks. And that was for veterans that sometimes you have a veteran pro that during the season they're going to take on damage, and they're not going to get surgery, and you've got to basically find them a way to creatively solve that problem and get back to zero before you start working again in the off season. So those would be some of the reasons why it could go longer.
Yeah. And the good thing about, I mean, because you work with primarily field sport athletes too as well, right? So the great thing there is that you have that season, you understand where they're at. They have off season, preseason, in season. If you did have, and I'm just going to talk because I know there's a lot of fighters and fight coaches that listen to this podcast. If you did have, let's say, someone like an MMA fighter or a jiu-jitsu practitioner, how would you go about training them if you did have them? I know it's definitely a question that you probably can't answer, but you may surprise people. Let me know what you would do, though.
Yeah, first off, I respect the sport, and I think it's come so far, and that you guys are leading from the front on putting the training side first. And so I love that about what's happening in combat sport. As far as the way I would approach it, it wouldn't be a lot different. I mean, I think you got to start with figuring out what is the signature uniqueness of this fighter. That's what's so cool about what you do, is that they have creative problem solving ability that they like to gravitate towards. And I know it's the job of the other fighter to make them not fight from that advantage point. However, I mean, I think after a fight, you got to get that person back to zero. Okay, what makes this person special? Let's get these tissue qualities back to where they're capable of at least doing those things. So range of motion, joint, foot function, toe function, making sure they get rotation in the tibia, that they can move, that they have spinal health in all planes of motion, and velocity in the core, and also stability in the core. I feel like in your sport, the engine is the spine. And it just looks like to me that guys that have speed in their facets in their spine and they have stability in their neck, they've got a lot of ways they can solve problems that the other guys don't. And you can have all the hand speed, striking speed you want, but I feel like in the MMA, if you don't have athletic qualities in the spine, you are going to get beat. If you ever get put on the ground, you're going to get beat if you're in a lot of these situations. So I would probably make that as big of a priority in training as possible. And you can't really train those qualities in the weight room. You can to a certain point, but I think there's got to be ballistic and strategic type of implementation in training. And I've seen you do some of those things.
Yeah, man, I love what you're doing too as well with the movement. Man, I seen some crazy stuff you did with the wrist and like just, it's almost like blending of like FRC or what I would do, and then also some yoga practice. It's awesome, man. I gotta actually pick your brain a little bit about that, maybe off camera, but sure. It's awesome, man, to see. So what are you doing now? What's the plan at the moment? What's going on with you?
Yeah, so right now, it's March 1st, basically. We're rolling out, and this is kind of the convergence season for us. So we've had a lot of these baseball players since October. Most of them have gone to camp now, the Major League Baseball guys. There's a few stragglers that are about to leave. And we also have an insurgence of the NFL offseason. They're all here now. We've got 30 of those guys. Nice. And then we've got draft prep guys. So as far as draft prep guys, we don't take a lot. We only took 12 this year. Mm-hmm. We've got a pretty good following for quarterbacks. I'm taking on a lot of those relationships. Some of them are private, some of them are public, but we work with three starters. I can say that in the NFL right now. And we have a couple prospects that I really like too. Nice. And we got some more coming in the fold that will be later this spring. But, for me personally, I'm trying to fire myself from every part of the business that I've got someone that is ready to elevate. Yeah. And what I'm doing personally is I have personal consulting relationships with 3 athletes right now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take on a few more where I'm talking it's as detailed as genetic tests, 3 daily conversations a day, individualized programming year round. I go to them If they deal with a therapist or massage person, I talk to that person, talking through what we're looking for. I mean, it's concierge service, so I'm doing some of those things. You know, obviously Patrick's one of those people. And then I have a couple team relationships, and I do consulting for a couple teams in the NFL and Major League Baseball. So as far as what I'm doing, this is a busy time of the year. When I love the baseball guys, but I won't be mad when they go. And then this draft prep pro day season, I'm ready to kick that off and really focus on the health of our NFL veterans. So that's what's going on now. You know, my staff doesn't get enough credit. I'm the mouthpiece for them, but I've got brilliant people that work for me in this company. And a lot of them have been here a decade. Most of them 6 years or more. And, you know, I don't know why they stay around, but they're carrying me, and I'm trying to bring them out and into the front. And so that's what's going on with us. That's what's going on with me.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So where can people find you? I know you got your Instagram. You got a website too as well. Where can they look you up? And if they want to come to the gym, go ahead and tell them where they can find you there too as well.
Yeah, so we've got 2 locations in Texas, and DFW, and then in East Texas. And that information is on teamapec.com. But if you follow us online, any of the social media, it's at Team APEC. Is our headquarters account. For me personally, on Instagram, at Stroupe Bob, and then on Twitter, I try to put out content, and I go back and forth. Some of it's educational, some of it's just an inside look into some training of some high-profile guys. But, you know, we really want people to get some value from it. So I'd love to connect with anybody that's got questions specifically about training or any of the things, like you said, on the business side. I love to connect on social media and learn from people, man. I've learned a lot from just watching your channels and your YouTube. We have some resources there as well. But man, I think we all need to sharpen each other, and everybody's got value. And if we can all learn from each other, I think we got a chance to be the best thing for our athletes. So please connect with me if you're listening to this.
Nice, man. So I'll make sure that we put the links down in the description too as well, so they can go ahead and just follow along. Plus, when I go ahead and I'll shoot it out on Instagram too as well. But Bobby, man, thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate your time, bro. I know you're a busy man, as am I. And I'll see you next time, all right? Thanks, guys, for watching.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.